meeting is now streaming live on YouTube. Good, good, good. Good morning, everyone. I realize that it's a Thursday morning, and I'm delighted to have each of you to join us for our criminal justice session. Again, we have Dr. Nelson, who I will reintroduce in just a moment, who will facilitate. I do want to share just a few things with you all before I forget, and one of which is that on yesterday, I think it was yesterday, yes, yesterday we had a great session, and the group that met came away with a hashtag that I want everyone to use. It was the Health and Human Services group. But we chose the hashtag Daytona for Equity. And we chose that because we're going to talk a little bit towards the end in my little segment about being equity ambassadors. And in other words, being those who kind of promote the cause of equity. We got to bring more people to the table, more people to be engaged in our sessions. But we want folks to use that hashtag so that we can generate an enthusiasm and an energy around this, because at the end of the day, my true objective and agenda is to see our community, Daytona Beach and the surrounding areas, become what I refer to as a model city for equity, where we embrace it in every corner of the community. So that I think that hashtag is ideal for us to use. As you all know, I sent you some questions and things to consider as we enter this morning's discussion. So I hope you had a chance to look those over, and whatever level you got through as it relates to those doesn't really matter. We'll discuss them and kind of have some next steps as we get to the end. But just hope you had a chance to look them over and kind of consider them. So this morning, Dr. Nelson is our facilitator, who I learned a lot more about prior to our signing on this morning. We had a brief conversation, and he comes to us with a wealth of knowledge and background as it relates to the overall sector of criminal justice and criminology. He's a professional criminologist with a doctoral degree and serves as professor and director of studies at Bethune-Cookman University. And he literally travels the width and breadth of this nation, training law enforcement and communities on how to properly interface with one another. So that's an important set of skills that he brings to the table. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this morning's session over to Dr. Nelson.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And I also would like to thank everyone just for taking their time out to be a part of such a needed and worthy conversation. So I definitely want to do that and want to make constructive use of your time. So I also received the email from the mayor regarding the points and objectives of the focus group. So today I want to separate it into two components: the micro, which is at our individual level, stripped of our roles and responsibilities within our agencies. So that's just Randy Nelson, country boy from rural North Florida, who I am, how I see the world in that perspective. In the second part, I want to look at the macro level, where it is the institutions and organizations by which we work. So with that, I think we want to use our focus, and the young lady, I can't remember her name from the first meeting, talked about collective efficacy. I still think that should be the overarching theme of us, that collective efficacy. But and Mayor, I wish you would have had that picture. I think that picture, equity versus equality.
Staff will put it up. It's supposed to go up each meeting. There you go.
I see it. Perfect. I think that in the context of collective efficacy, I think that captures what it is that we're talking about. It's not necessarily, it's inclusive of race, gender, sex, age, religion, social orientation. I think it's not one, it's all. It's not this or that, it's this and that and that and that. So when we're talking at the micro level as well as at the macro level, it's being cognizant that it's all of these things. In today's climate, I think race is front and center, because in the history of America, when you look at in terms of riots or serious tensions, most of it is due to racial issues, and 99.9% of it is racial issues related to law enforcement. Most major disturbances in the US were and have been due to direct result of a law enforcement action relative to a racial minority, more often than not Black. So we're not lost on that, but the context and the scope and breadth of what we're talking today is inclusive of, as I said before, race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, everything that you can add to that pool. So we're talking about equity and equality is along all of those realms. So with that, I think we can go into the micro, and what I would like to do individually that we'll go through in terms, once again, we're stripped of whether I'm the state attorney or I'm the deputy chief of police. At the micro level is your perspective and worldview relative to what can we do in this place and space to create great equity across the board. So it's at the individual level, stripped of your position or title where you are now. So we're just talking John Reed, not as John Reed, state attorney, but John Reed as a father, as a community resident, so on and so forth. So we can do that, and we can start, we can reverse our way up. So we can start with Mr. Reed. I'm just looking at the picture. So Mr. Reed, you're next to the mayor. So I'll go with you.
And I'm you're breaking up some of my screen exactly. And what did you say you're looking for?
Or you're going to give, relative to the questions that the mayor talked about, sent out, but this is at the micro level. John Reed as a father, as a husband, as a community resident, what can you do within that space in terms of equity? And equity is inclusive of all the things that I talked about: race, religion, sexual orientation, everything that's in that box of equity.
I mean, I think just as a person, what anybody can do is lead by example. And like you said, I have a 3-year-old son, and you're going to teach him, and by example, and by telling him that you treat everybody the same, and showing him that you treat everybody the same. And I know you're talking about as a person, but I think in my job as well. I mean, you do the same thing. You lead by example. A lot of anyone's life is their job, and certainly a lot of my life is my job. And I make sure I spend a lot of time training new attorneys, young attorneys, and showing them to do the same thing. I still handle some cases from time to time, and I do the same thing that I would tell an attorney to do, that you look at each case and look at it based on the mitigators and the aggravators, and not on the color of someone's skin, their ethnicity, their sexual orientation, their gender, anything like that. You look at what are the facts of the crime, what exactly happened, what's their prior history, what's going on in their life, what are their problems they have. And I think by showing, by actually doing that, reviewing that, going through it with them, I think that's where you take out those other factors and do what is right by treating everybody the same.
Right. And we're going to delve into that part of it, because we have Dr. Youssef and Dr. Janice Kelsey, who's actually going to be the one synthesizing all this information. And we're dividing it up into the micro, what do we do as an individual void of our workplace. And then we're going to go to the macro level where we talk about some of the things that you're talking about within your workplace and space. So that's very helpful. Karen, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm Karen. I'm Karen Delisle. I'm a retired registered nurse, psychiatric nurse, and we raised our children here and then had to move away for the 20 years to Orlando when GE closed. And I'm a member of Faith, and my point of view is that I'm facilitating part of 3 groups right now of mainly white people about anti-racism classes, you know, and we're reading Dr. Kinde's book and things like that from Our Lady of Lourdes. So that's where I'm doing. But my children grew up in this community, went on to have very successful lives. They were safe, and that's what I want for today's children too. I want them to have the same opportunities. I'm gonna hop in and out of meetings because I have another meeting, if that's okay with y'all. And I appreciate you letting me be here. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Dr. Youssef, I know that you're synthesizing information, but you're also a part of the group as well. So once again, we're talking about you and your personal space, not Dr. Youssef at Bethune-Cookman University, but you and your personal space. Where and how can you help us in this equity to live out the mayor's initiative of equity within your personal social space? She's gone. So Christy, that goes to you then. Can you, the ball goes to you.
Okay. I know personally, I try to teach my children. You know, I've had family members and friends and that don't have the same view, but try to pay it forward and teach my children, and hopefully being able to have those lasting impressions, and also have had those difficult conversations with my kids. You know, what's okay, what's not okay. Also, have been participating in the Department of Juvenile Justice statewide initiative as well, with the DJJ Equity Challenge, and again, having those difficult and challenging conversation with peers, and being open to listen and to grow.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Jean Ann?
Jean Tanky. And I didn't get a copy of the questions, I'm sorry to say, so I'm at a disadvantage to start off with. I'm a native Detroiter, and I'm primarily signed up to join this group as a member of the board of the ACLU of Volusia Flagler. And I wish I'll have to find out why I didn't get a copy of the questions.
Well, I can briefly go through it, so I at least give you context. The mayor asked that could you identify standards of equity? What are the current guidelines for equity at your place of employment? Review and analyze those guidelines. Next, he said, consider what you think the role of an equity ambassador might be. Third, consider any resources that you might want to share with your focus group and bring them with you. And lastly, come with an actionable equity agenda for you or your agency, or commit to working with others in your agency to develop one in the immediate future.
Okay, well, I've been retired for 20 years, so I'm probably the oldest person here, but I am a board member of both the League of Women Voters and the ACLU, and both of us, of course, both of those groups are very interested in whatever we can do to improve the racial situation in Daytona Beach and the country.
Thank you. Lucretia, and I just want to keep getting into where we are. We're looking at the micro and the macro level. Right now we're doing micro, meaning your personal space where you are devoid of where you work, who you work for, but in your personal space as a mother, daughter, community resident, what can you do to help us achieve the mayor's initiative of equity. And once again, that's both racial, sex, gender, sex, religion, social. It's a huge box. Although, as I said before, I know race is front and center for a number of reasons, but it's this and that and that and that. Is not this or that.
That's a great point to consider. I am a mother of four, two which are teenagers, one who is an adult. Obviously, they all think they're adults, and then a 10-year-old. I am now in a biracial relationship. My husband and I have been happily married for 12 years now, and he's of the Latin descent. So I do want to consider, even with my children, I have this talk to them all the time in the same way my parents raised me. Color is a beautiful thing. We're on this planet to embrace each other, not to discriminate one for another. And so I talk to them all the time about understanding, we want to understand others' frustrations, because people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And that's where the frustrations are coming from. Even when I discipline my own children, if I don't listen to their argument, then it's still going to create tension in the household. So I want to make sure that I understand their point of view as well as my side of the situation. So I think it's important to listen to all sides. Absolutely, there's been a frustration going on in injustice and inequality for a very long time. And people are absolutely frustrated because they feel like they are not being heard. And that's where I stand with that.
Thank you. Excellent point. I think Dr. King referred to as the voice of the unheard. So absolutely. I was doing some training with Seminole County Sheriff's Office on Monday. And I told them if they didn't leave with anything else, it's just, they had to know that the badge means different things to different people. If you were to ask my mother what the badge meant to her, she would tell you that when she was a young lady protesting in Tallahassee, it was a badge that had the dogs and hoses. That's what the badge meant to her. You get a young man that just fresh out of the academy, shining, his chest is out. That's what the badge means to him, that he wants to protect and serve. So I don't think we have to agree with everyone's perspective, but I think we do need to be aware of it, particularly if we're going to serve a diverse community. So thank you for that point. Ms. Turner? You're mute.
Hello, my name's Eileen Turner. I reside in Daytona Beach. This is our 4th year here. We had retired and moved from Pennsylvania. I'm a retired special education teacher. That was my whole career, although I started right after college. It's funny how life circles around. As a VISTA volunteer in a minimum security prison unit in North Carolina in Lumberton, and ended up teaching high school English as well as social studies in a locked youth detention center in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. So education and juvenile justice have always been forefront in my mind. And one thing I learned in listening yesterday, I think listening's I'm a good listener. I'm not as good a communicator, but I do take what I hear with me. And one thing one thing I was very surprised to hear, but reflecting on it last night, people should be treated differently in a sense that when you talk to them, have to think of their perspective in talking with them, and that it's not as important just to relay who you are and where you come from, but listening to who they are and question and where are they from and how do they see things. So I in reflecting, I could probably say a lot more, but I won't. I'm very interested in this equity initiative. and what
Thank
they do for the city.
Thank you. I think that having an open forum and in an environment where you can feel comfortable to communicate, because I think that some of it is that we're so divided as a nation now, you have to choose a side. And I think what we forget is whether you're black, white, green or yellow, Jew or Gentile, Democrat or Republican, we all want a safe and nurturing environment to raise our family. And once we meet there, we can work our way out. So I thank you for your comment. Miss Suzanne?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I came from Detroit many years ago, and I'm a serial volunteer. I wave a lot of flags. I stand on a lot of soapboxes. I'm a mother of 5, a grandmother of a dozen, and they are all thankfully very, very involved in their communities and very active. Robin King yesterday said something that really hit home. We were talking about people who came for help to make their lives better and then went home and were told by the family members, what, you think you're better than me? And that does hold down a lot of people. We also talked yesterday about people of different races or people of different ethnic backgrounds going into the community together because one would not be met with the same enthusiasm that a couple of people would be. So that you have to come to people where they are and you have to understand where they are. And we all have you know, a different focus in our minds from our personal experiences. So I thought it just really hit home because that's what the young person in my family was met with, was what you think we're better, you're better than me or than us, that you can, you know, put us down by making yourself better.
Right. Right. No, I think that that's where we are, though. I think if you actually look, I think a lot of the division that we see now is, I refer to it as self-preservation. I think whether you talk about politics, whether you talk about racial identification, such, I think a lot of it is self-preservation, and self-preservation is innate to all humans. The problem I think now is that when I'm willing to hold someone else's kid down or hold another side down so mine could that's where the rub lies. I'm willing to give my kids every opportunity, every support I can that they succeed. I'm not willing to hold down Mayor Henry's kid so mine can elevate. And I think that we bastardize self-preservation to that level here. But once again, it's, at the end of the day, it is self-preservation. So I can understand why some people can look at demographic trends, can look at that they want their kids to have some of the privileges and things they've had. That no, I can that's human to understand that. But I think as a people, we have to evolve to the point that all of us deserve that same playing field and work from there. But it's difficult. I mean, we're human. And at the end of the day, we want everyone to be able to thrive and grow, but self-preservation is live and real. So Deputy Chief Young, glad
Yes,
you can.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. So what we're asking is, you're taking off your Deputy Chief Young hat. You're responding to the question, the mayor's question of how can you, within your space of influence, separate and aside from Deputy Chief Young, as a father, as a husband, as a community resident, within your personal space outside of your professional space, what can you do to raise that equity? And once again, equity is not just race, but you know, sex, gender, age, economic class, all of those things. So that being said, what is your commitment, or what can you do to help within that space?
That, you kind of caught me off guard with that one because I'm in my deputy chief mode.
No,
So
I know. That's next.
yeah, so to take it off and just be Jakari, I would have to reflect back to the early stages of my teaching and upbringing. Just when you talk
Yes.
about my personal morals and my moral compass and my ethics, and go back to the golden rule that we were all taught, where it says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And just for me personally, I can't push I'm a man of faith, and I can't push that off onto anybody else, but my spiritual beliefs and my faith as a Christian, I believe, are what keep me in line and keep me being that ambassador for equity in my personal life. And I just hope that that carries over into this job that I've chosen, because for me, it's not just a profession. This is for me a ministry. So to carry that over into this job and be in a position of leadership, that's critically important for me. Like I said, I can't tell people who to believe in and what to believe in, but the way I was raised and brought up, equity is critical because it's all about, fair and equal treatment, doing the right things for folks, realizing like that picture that's been up there throughout all of these sessions is so profound, because equity, I've carried this discussion over into the command staff. So it's not just me working on this project. I've shared these questions with my captains, and it spawned an interesting discussion because they were confusing equity with equality because they haven't seen that picture. So they're thinking we're being equitable if we provide everybody the same. And I had to say, no, that's not what this is. Equity says some may need more in order to level the playing field. So just opening up and sharing these discussions and dialogues with my captains. I know I'm not supposed to have my deputy chief hat on. I'm just supposed to be talking as Jakari, but it's hard not to, marry them together. But, I know I'm kind of rambling, but for me personally, just my upbringing and my teachings and just wanting to, treat others the way I would want to be treated, and treating everybody I come into contact with, whether I know them or not. If they need my help, I'm treating them like they're that family member, that mom, that grandma, that grandpa, and doing everything in my ability to be a problem solver and to be a good servant.
Right. Well, thank you. I'm finding it a little interesting that both you and John, the males, it's hard for you to separate your individual self from your job. Both of you guys go back to your job. And I think that's one of those gender differences. But the females have been able to internalize it themselves in terms of where they are. So, and I tell police officers that you had a history before you put on the badge or before you went to your workplace and space. So I think that's a interesting difference, but it was noticed. Dr. Youssef, you're next on the line, and once again, I know you got kicked off. What we're asking is for you to remove your hat as professor, Bethune-Cookman University, but as Dr. Youssef, mother, wife, community resident, what can you do in your space, your personal space, to achieve the mayor's equity charge for this group and the community?
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. I found myself, I did get kicked off, but coming in at the tail end of what Jakari was saying, that as a Muslim American, I think there's a lot of similarities in terms of just people of faith. Like, so your tenets and beliefs guide you. My family immigrated from Ethiopia, well, part of my family, my mother's side. So that I think that my sensitivity to understanding language barriers, limited education, struggle, particularly things associated with those who have been you know, coming to the United States to seek refuge or a better life is definitely connected to who I am, how I see myself. I think that what I've heard everyone say, and I think it's similar for me, is that all of this influences how you treat other people. So wanting people to respect who you are and treat you with a certain level of civility, whether or not they agree with you. And I think that that's really important for me. So I think that in every scenario and situation, I tend to identify with the underdog, whether it be someone who's younger, someone who's a female, someone who's of African descent, someone who might be newly immigrated here, and try to treat them in a way that you would treat someone who others in society see having more social value, whether it be because they have money or their gender or their economic, you know, or their education level. So for me, I think it's just the same thing, the golden rule, wanting people to respect you and not see past you, understand and try to understand your story and treat them with the same level of respect that you would treat anyone else with.
Thank you very much. I think we've gone through it. Jenny, did we get to you?
No.
Well, you're on, Jenny. I see.
Hello.
Hiya.
Good morning, everybody. I'm a little bit late. Thank you for calling on me. So I can relate to the people who say it's hard to separate their work from their personal, because I am very passionate about the environment 24/7, and my job is a self-appointed freelance environmental educator. So I'm constantly doing my work, but the lens of my environmentalism is a design field called permaculture, which is not just about the physical environment, it's about the whole human built environment, and it has to include economic equity and social equity. So it's very much of a topic. And yet, even in my design field, there are people who are not educated as to the fact that we're more than a bunch of organic farmers and gardeners and tree lovers, that we're all about people. And so people have, part of what I do in my personal life, it bleeds into my work life, but it's in my personal life, is educate somebody that, no, this is on topic. Like if I post about Black Lives Matter on my permaculture page, that is on topic. And then also in my personal life, I've been really learning about systemic racism. I didn't really know what it was. I knew that racism was a problem still, because I could see some of my attitudes were not what I wanted to be, and they didn't fit. But then I started studying systemic racism and participating. There's a white fragility book group, and I've done some, what is it called? Diversity and Resilience Institute of El Paso, did some anti-racism training with them. And I've really gotten into the concept of being anti-racist every day, every moment in my personal life. And it can carry over into anything. If somebody's, you know, I can be anti-discrimination toward anybody if I see a woman who's not getting a fair chance. So I proactively promote female-owned businesses. I proactively promote Black-owned businesses. I am constantly out and about on my bicycle in my community. So I always see businesses that are lacking, like, hey, 3 laundromats closed down in my neighborhood. And the people who don't have cars can't get to a laundromat easily. And so if I see a laundromat, you know, locally owned laundromat, I will proactively promote them. So my kind of like my whole life, sometimes I feel like I'm always at work, but it's my love. So there you have it. And thank you all.
Thank you. And I apologize. Sounds like my lawn crew is coming to mow my yard at the most inopportune time, but for a minute. But we also have with us Dr. Janice Allen Kelsey, who's also going to be one of the ones that take all of this brilliant information and help us to package it and synthesize it. But also, she's also a participant in the group. So, Dean Kelsey, where we are now is we're still on micro, and you're the last one in our micro conversation. And what we're asking in the micro, within your personal space, devoid of your role at Bethune-Cookman University, but your role as a mother, as a community resident in Daytona for umpteen years, what can you do within that personal space to help us to achieve the equity that the mayor has challenged us as individual as well as a community to get to. So what can you do in your personal space towards that end? You're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning. So when I think about what I can do in my personal space as an individual, I think it would be to pay attention to the current events that are actually occurring around me, and participate in the various activities and events that are being presented to help us address some of the issues. The issue that concerns me in my personal space here, as a parent, is that I make sure, having had a daughter, that sexism does not prevail, that she has equity in what she does, participating in the various activities and events that she participated in when she was here. And so, I was a member of the PTA. She went to the community center, so I was always at the center. And so, just being involved, not waiting for other people.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now we're transitioning into the macro level. And with that, we'll go to John. Now, John, you and Jakara can fill in the blanks on how you guys are going to influence the institution, because you have individual acts, whether it's racism, sexism, at the micro level, but in the macro level, we're talking about institutions and systems. And that's where some of the conversation you were talking before about your individual lawyers and that work, because when an institution does something, and the Ferguson Police Department was a clear example of that, where you had government and institutions working collectively to increase revenue through an act of government and I think we're at the heart of why folk really had heartburn with that. So once again, we're looking at the institutions and workplaces and systems now. So Mr. Reed, we can start with you.
Well, thank you. And, obviously with the state attorney's office and the criminal justice system, we're pretty much at the end of the line. So, by the time the cases come to us, that there is typically, as a crime has been committed. Like I was talking about before, for every attorney, we give them extensive training that anytime you're, making a plea offer, you're trying to resolve a case, you're making a filing decision, anything like that, there's zero tolerance if you're making that decision based on someone's race, gender, ethnicity, anything like that. We talk to them and teach them and show them how you look at the aggravators and the mitigators. What's the crime that was committed? What's the prior record? What are the mitigating factors? Is things like are drugs an issue, mental health an issue, things like that. And and then ultimately, we have to make sure that law is followed and that the community's safe. So it's a balancing between rehabilitating the defendant and also protecting the community. And I think what we've tried to do, and I think we've done a pretty good job, is we've implemented quite a few diversionary programs for a rehabilitation effort. Like we talk about, people throw around tough on crime or being soft on crime, and I don't think either one of those works. I think you have to be smart on crime. What we've done is we've broken it down, and we have a career criminal unit, which is our top attorneys that handle the worst of the worst. The ones that I think everybody would agree are just, people who are dangerous to be in our community, child rapists, any type of sex criminal, murderers, armed robbers, armed home invasions, burglary, people with extensive violent criminal history, all of those people. Those are the ones that obviously, it's dangerous to have, in our community. So we have our attorneys that target those criminals to just get them off the street, you know, because those are the people who typically everybody would want off the street. And then for everybody else, we look at, you know, how can we get them back into the community, back into being a productive member of society? And we try to look at, you know, what's the issue? Why did they commit this crime? You know, and obviously you'll see a massive quantity of our cases are drug related. And we've implemented, since I've been here, a whole bunch of different drug programs. We have a program that kind of the overarching program called the STEP program, Strategic Treatment Escalation Program, which encompasses 11 drug treatment programs that range from, you know, people who maybe, you know, smoked a little bit of pot or, you know, a little bit of some, you know, you had a little bit of cocaine, but you don't really have a real hardcore addiction, where we focus on education and then dropping the charge so you don't have a criminal record. And then even if you're a few steps above that, we have programs for drug treatment where we still end up dropping the charge. And then, you know, if you are committing crime, have a hardcore problem, you know, very addicted to drugs, we have drug court that we've partnered with a bunch of different treatment providers in the area to give very extensive drug treatment. And unfortunately, this drug treatment's much better than you could get if you didn't commit a crime. I mean, I think that's a whole other issue we're looking at, but a lot of these people can't get the type of really, you know, top-notch drug treatment without committing a crime. But at least for us, we do take it and we give them that intensive treatment, give them that option still instead of incarceration, instead of prison. So we have all kinds of drug treatment programs, and we have a sliding scale of different programs to try to give everybody those opportunities. And we have plenty of other programs we've done. We have veterans we've identified, obviously have a lot of PTSD, and which leads to self-medication for drug programs that we've done. Even things for, there's a lot of crimes committed because of economics, like driving on suspended license. If you can't, you get a traffic ticket, you can't pay your ticket unless you go to work. But if you go to work, now you're driving on a suspended license. So we've implemented programs there where we just try to get you, we actually help you get your license back in-house. And we drop the charges. So, you know, we've been focusing a lot on that type of alternative prosecution rather than, you know, the old fashioned, if you committed a crime, this big statute book says this is what happens to you. So that's what happens to you. I mean, that doesn't do any good. I mean, truthfully, you put someone in jail for a week. I mean, every now and then you got to just slap someone's hand. But I mean, typically that doesn't do any good to society, doesn't make any of us safer. But, you know, if you try to rehabilitate all the people over here that don't, you know, that just have drug treatment problems, mental health problems, that I think helps. And then if you take the small group that are just, I mean, dangerous people, like we just had that triple homicide over in Polk County. I mean, I think everyone would agree that you just got to get those people off the street, you know, and try to really hit those people. So that's what, you know, what we've been trying to do. And you don't look at anybody based on their, you know, skin color, race, anything else. You just look at what's the problem. And, you know, is this somebody we can rehabilitate and get them back on the street? Or is this somebody who's so dangerous, we got to take them, you know, off the street? And I'll say the one area that I think that this community is lacking, and really the court system in general, is mental health treatment. That's obviously a big component. A lot of the drugs are, you know, people have mental health and they self-medicate with drugs. And I think you see that. I've done this my whole career, and that's a huge majority of the cases. And we are working here. We were hoping to actually have a mental health pilot program in our circuit. We were actually, you know, RJ and I had been up in Tallahassee. We've been working with Daytona Beach Police Department and VCSO to try to get that program. Then when COVID hit, just like everybody, you know, funding got slashed. But, you know, that's the other thing you see at the state attorney's level is, you know, these programs are great, but they're expensive. You know, they'll always give you money for, you know, or we can always just, you know, create more people in the jail, but you can't get the money for the beds, for the drug treatment and the mental health treatment. And that's an unfortunate reality. But we've been creative to try to get, you know, to do a lot of these programs without, you know, the funds. I mean, we've rearranged funds like for the driver's license programs. We've just funded it in-house. You know, we just had to take money from other places, but a lot of these programs we've done in-house. We lost one of our low-level drug treatment programs. That was probably one of our most successful. That was an educational program for people who were, not big drug addicts that were, like just stupid kids. You get a 19, 20-year-old kid who's smoking some pot or has a little bit of cocaine. He's down here partying. We don't want to make them a criminal the rest of their life. So we were giving them an educational program and then dropping the charges. And then the company that did that just said it wasn't profitable and cut it out. But they actually have agreed to give us the program. So now we're trying to fund that in-house, and we have a computer programmer who's trying to put it back together. But we've done a lot of things like that to try to help people across the board and not make it so if you're wealthy, you get better treatment than if you're poor. We've tried to have the treatment programs for everybody.
Thank you. And I do commend you guys. Your circuit is probably one of the more progressive. So, and what you just outlined shows why. One of the things that I'm seeing, and not only in law enforcement, but in education, I think it's very difficult to find someone, not that it doesn't happen, but it's very difficult to find someone that sentences blacks harsher or sentences females harsher intentionally. I think it's very, very difficult. I mean, not difficult, it does happen, but I think it's some of the unintended and unconscious bias that I think into the decision-making process. So whether it's the state attorney's office or Bethune-Cookman University or Daytona Police Department, I think it does behoove us to keep data and records on sentencing or what type of offers are sent out. Because as a black male, I would be lying to you if I said if I were to pull over a white male with a swastika and a Confederate flag that I didn't have a perception of it. If I were to pull over a black male with gold teeth, dreads, and saggy, I have a perception of him. If I were to pull over a black male or white male, clean cut with khaki, I have a perception. But within the institution of whether it's law enforcement or the law, I can't treat them any differently. And I do think that we need to not only continue with the bias training, but also looking at data and things to help us, because unintentional bias still goes against what we're looking in terms of equity and equality. So I still think as institutions in each of our systems that we have to have ways to look at those things either by data, but also ensure that we'll continue to train on those things to make sure that they don't creep in, whether they're intentional or unintentional, the end result is the same. So, but I do want to thank you personally, thank you for the progressive positions and stances that you guys are taking in the circuit.
Real quick, just on your topic of the data, I mean, you're right about that. And RJ Lariz, he's been up in Tallahassee appointed for the prosecutors to work on this data collection bill. And I've actually gotten with him, with FDLE's the one putting it together. We've been up there several times and really pushing it, trying to get it going, working on trying to unify the police reports. So, because if y'all don't know, every jurisdiction has different police forms. The Seventh Circuit uses the same, but every other circuit has different ones. So we are really working on that, because you're correct about that. It's just, I think with COVID, it slowed everything down, including everything. That.
Yeah, but I think that FDLE, they had that wait for COVID. They were supposed to be up and running, so that's a whole nother issue. But I'm glad to hear that you guys are still pushing for it, because sometimes it takes that collective efficacy. It takes all of us pushing in that direction. But thank you. Ms. Jean, we're at the macro level, so within your organization or whatever sphere of influence you have within institution, organization that you work with or a part of.
That's for me, for the deputy chief?
No, that's Ms. Jean.
Okay.
Well, the ACLU, of course, has been working on a lot of those same issues as far as objecting to removal of driver's licenses for non-driving related offenses for, and trying to promote civil citations. A lot of juvenile justice work from both the league and the ACLU. I can't think of any thing that John mentioned that the ACLU hasn't been involved with, but I don't know specifically what more I should say here, but yeah, civil citations, we've been working on that and had meetings with a lot of the groups in faith there as well. No additional comment, I guess.
No, I continuing those efforts. I mean, ACLU and others have been out there for a while, so I think continuing those efforts, just being intentional and strategic with the extent, because you said they have a long history of fighting for these issues. So I think continuing those efforts, but the cell phone used to be in a bag. I always tell people when I came out of the academy in 1992, they gave me a cell phone in the bag, a pair of handcuffs, and a .357 revolver. Well, the cell phone can fit in your hand like it fit in the palm of your hand now. So it's whether it's peaceful protests, whether it's trying to get amendment for whatever the issue is. I think that we as individuals and group collectively have to evolve, and I think that there are different ways to be effective at things, and some things that worked in the 60s may not work now. So continuing to evolve in our practice and our processes to get to that stage of equity that we've been discussing. So thank you for your work, Jean. Eileen, you're next on the queue. You're muted. You're muted.
Sorry. Just listening. I have, I'm all behind anything that is going to level the playing field. And I think in my past, education taught me educating a diverse, very diverse group of students taught me that education can level things to a degree. I think I learned as much from my students, if not more than they did from me, because of where they came from and what they brought with them. And the programs that have to do with piggybacking on Jean have to do with civil citations and looking at the cases of juveniles and where they have come from and what blanket rules don't work. You really have to look at each case individually. Rehabilitation, I've always been for it, but recidivism has always been a big issue. And I just want to keep working forward in a positive manner, whatever that may be, whatever that equity looks like. I want to be there.
Thank you. Suzanne?
Yes.
You're on.
Okay, in my business life, I'm a commercial realtor and a business broker. I'm with Coldwell Banker in Ormond Beach, and I have a responsibility to my company to make money for my company. I have a responsibility to make sure that I make money to pay my bills. And in the past, that's been taking properties that perhaps could use a little fixing up and bringing them to market rents. In the past year and a half to 2 years, I've been pulled into the affordable housing market, which is a different mindset. We need 16,000 units right now in Volusia County, working on bringing 100 units to Daytona Beach. but it's a difficult process because there are so many rules and regulations and so many dollars. That's a $12 million to $16 million ticket item. And so, you know, we have ethics, we have rules we have to follow, and we have to fight with the NIMBY issue, the not in my backyard. So it's listening to the community. Do you want single family houses? Do you want an apartment complex? Do you want it for families? Do you want it for veterans? Do you want it for seniors? We're bringing in a lot of senior communities, but most of them are priced out of the market. It costs $10,000 to $12,000 a month to be at Brookdale, where the average person on Social Security gets $1,380 a month. So it's balancing those, you know, aspects of life here in the community. And I've been drinking from the fire hose a lot to learn, you know, how to make it happen and why to make it happen where.
Thank you. I guess that goes into that box of both age and socioeconomic status. So I think that, and maybe we can talk off back channels. That's my other hard item was affordable housing. So we can talk on back channels on that one.
Okay.
Now, Deputy Chief Young, now you have your Deputy Chief hat on now.
Okay. Can you hear me still?
Yes.
Okay. So this particular initiative is something that is, particularly with the timing and everything going on in the country, that I'm taking extremely serious, and it's personal for me. So this initiative, I'm actually adding to our strategic plan for the department as a whole to make sure that as we plan for the future, all of our policies, all of our procedures, and all of our training center around being fair and being equitable. Probably the most profound action plan that I have so far is I'm actually looking at changing our mission statement, because our current mission statement makes no reference to a partnership with the community. And I feel that having a mission statement that doesn't reference some form of a partnership with the community is a flawed statement. So I've given members of the command staff homework to think of how we can reconstruct our mission statement to include a partnership with the community. So one of them that I received yesterday, I wrote it down because I like it. We haven't made a final decision on it, but it's a simple statement that says, building safe neighborhoods through community partnership, collaboration, and accountability. And I think when I look at that statement, that kind of hones in on what the focus should be. Not that the current statement is necessarily inept. I just feel like we just need to change it. So the current statement says that the mission of the Daytona Beach Police Department is to serve and protect the citizens and visitors of Daytona Beach while providing safety, improved quality of life in our communities through excellence in policing. For one, I think it's a little bit lengthy. And again, it doesn't reference that partnership with the community. So I think that's probably the most profound that I've come up with so far, is changing our mission statement. Furthermore, I talked a lot about this in the opening listening session, where I think also is what's critically important is that we continue to focus on our policies, our procedures, and our training to make sure that they all center around the sanctity of human life. We've done a lot. over the past 10 years to make sure that that is the focus, from the implementation of body cameras to all of our patrol officers. But another thing that I've identified that that we're kind of lacking as far as transparency is body cameras for our plainclothes investigators. So most of our detectives that are assigned to the Criminal Investigation Division, they come to work in polo shirts, khaki pants, and they're not in that hard uniform. So we don't assign them body cameras. So recently, I put a policy in place to where if the investigators are going out to do an operation, they must have a body camera. I don't expect people to sit at their desk with a body camera attached to their tie or to their blouse. But if you know you're going out into the community and you're going to look for a fugitive or whatever the case may be, and there's a chance that you can, engage in use of force, you will have a body camera. So that's something that we got it in place now, but we're building on it, because initially when we bought our cameras, we only bought for those that were going to be out there in the forefront, answering calls for service and making the arrest. But I identified that because as I listen and respond to calls throughout the day, I'm seeing more and more of our investigators that are actually, getting in foot pursuits and things of that nature and taking folks into custody. And we don't have body cameras on them. So that was a huge change in my mind, because it's only a matter of time before a plainclothes officer or investigator engages in a use of force, and it can garner scrutiny, media attention, and if we don't have video to back up what we did, that's going to create some problems. So that was one thing that I identified. You mentioned the bias training. That's huge. So we got to continue to, we're going to get together later on, but we got to continue to keep that bias training going. We have some training set up at the end of this month called critical decision-making training. And it's just kind of making sure we do our part to erase that old school mindset of drawing a line in the sand and saying, okay, I'm giving you direction, and if you cross this line, then all bets are off. Making sure that is no longer the mindset. I've always been a believer that when we talk de-escalation, de-escalation starts at initial contact. I probably sound like a broken record because I know I've said this before, but that to me is the key to a lot of this stuff. It's all in how we communicate and talk to people. We run across people all the time, whether it be a traffic stop or just a citizen encounter. They may fit the description, but they may not be who we're looking for. And it's all in how we approach them, and it's all in that initial contact and what we say to them and how we approach them. So continuing doing this critical incident training, and just continuing to review, continuing to train, getting that mission statement up to date, making sure we're covered as far as transparency with our body cameras. And I know I'm forgetting a few things because I'm jumping around a little bit, but that's where we're at for now. But again, as far as my portion of this, we're still under construction, because this is huge for us. So we're still under construction, and I still got more work to do with regard to what we're going to do with this project.
Right. And all of us do. I think this, although the mayor's charge is to set a path forward, but this is continuing to evolve and improve. We have to. I mean, what worked 10 years ago, like I said, with the cell phone, things change daily. So it's continuing to work. So I say the same to you as I said to John. I've gone all over the country, but you guys are more progressive. I mean, and that, not to say that there aren't issues that need to be fixed and things that need to be done. But when we believe that we're the best and there's nothing else to do, that's right before the fall. So that being said, the other thing that I commend you is one of the commission statements that I use wherever I go, or whether it's Bakersfield, California, or Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The Jacksonville Sheriff's Office's mission statement is to serve and protect in partnership with our community. Partnerships is completely different than an agreement. Most times people call us in to do training, it's because they have an agreement with the community as opposed to a relationship or a partnership. And in an agreement, you come in, when I call you, someone stole my car, and get the hell out when you finish. We don't have this, just straight agreement. An agreement, if someone shot in the middle of the day and the police come, no one saw anything. I don't know what, but if it's my child, I'll go to hell and back. But if it's somebody, I'm not getting involved. So a lot of that in terms of the difference between a partnership, relationship, and that of agreement is how much law enforcement, how much effort law enforcement put in. But the second part of that is the community has a responsibility as well. And we have to make sure that we build, work, and communicate that it's a two-way street with accountability. Because someone shot in the middle of the day and no one saw anything, that's not law enforcement, that's the community need to take that responsibility. So we have that. And one of the other things that I'm very thankful for Sheriff Chitwood, they yesterday or the day before, they donated a simulator, a law enforcement simulator, that law enforcement, you have some law enforcement agents in the country that don't have them, but Bethune-Cookman University, we have them. And it'll help us train not only our students, the next generation of law enforcement professionals, but also the community can come in and get a perspective of law enforcement, some of the split-second decision. Now that doesn't take the onus off of law enforcement, that law enforcement as a profession, not only law enforcement, the criminal justice system, we have to do a better job of not letting folk in that do not represent themselves or the profession the way it needs to be.
Right.
The profession have to do that. That's not the community. Now what the community can and must do is do a better job of helping recruit the best and the brightest from the community to go into law enforcement, to go into the state attorneys, to go into public. We have to do that. But once again, it's both ways. So once again, Deputy Chief Young,
Can I add a couple things real quick? Can I add a couple things real quick?
Yes.
So I omitted probably the other part that's extremely critical, and probably because of COVID, it slipped my mind because it's really been hampering our community engagement efforts. Because we can have the best policies, most solid policies, procedures, and training in place in the country, but if we're not out there in the community and they're not seeing us, or the only time they do see us is when we're coming to arrest mom or dad, then we're still missing the mark. So our community engagement efforts are just as important, if not more important, is for us to be able to get out there in the community. And it doesn't always have to be a full-blown community event. It doesn't have to be anything advertised via social media. If calls for service allow, just getting out of the car, throwing the ball, challenging some kids to a race, helping somebody carry their groceries from the car into the house if they trust us enough and they're willing to allow us to do so. But I think being consistent in our community engagement efforts will go a long way. I omitted that earlier. And then just one last thing, it's not necessarily an initiative that I would call it, but I just wanted to share this quick story. About a month or so ago, I had an officer, and I think he's been here probably about 6 or 7 years now, white male. And he came to see me, and he was bothered by things that are going on in this country right now, and feeling that there are those in the community that feel that just because he is white and he is a police officer, that he is a racist. And it was put on his heart to try to put together a community forum, because what he said was the community always hears from the chief or the deputy chief or the captains, and they very rarely, if ever, hear from us rank and file, boots on the ground cops. And I said, Matt, I think that is a phenomenal idea. Obviously, we got some hurdles to get over with regards to COVID and being able to do this, because I know we're going to virtual, but I just don't feel like this would be as successful if we try to do it virtual. This was something I was looking at maybe before our numbers skyrocketed again with COVID. I was looking at maybe securing the News Journal Center and promoting this to where I had 14 officers that requested to do this. I wasn't going to ask anybody to do this because I don't want it to seem forced. If it's put on their heart that they want to engage in an open dialogue with the community, just to say, we are not robots. We are human beings. We want the same things for our families that you want for your families, and just engage and share some of their experiences that they've experienced while serving this community. I just think it's a phenomenal idea. I'm hoping at some point things will clear up enough to where I can actually put this together, because again, you always hear from the chief, the deputy chief, or the captains. We're going to take a step back and let the cops themselves engage the community in just an open discussion. And the fact that they wanted to do it, I thought that was awesome.
I think it's an excellent idea, but you better make sure that they're structured.
Oh yeah. I think I'll rope you into it. You may need to modify for me.
You know, hey, I don't do those, man. I don't do that. Those things can get rough. So, but I think the intent and what's coming from the heart, I think you should commend them for that. And I think that things like that need to take place. But I'm under the thing that you have to have chips. A lot of the things that you mentioned before, the helping out, the plan, you got to get chips in the bank. And once you get those chips in the bank, it's easier to do things like that. But right. I do think that there are minutes. So it's kind of like, you know, I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day. So right. I just, that is there, but I think you got to work. But yeah, folk call me all the time about town halls. I don't do them because they tend to talk past each other because they come from different reasons. And particularly when you're in a community that have felt oppressed and occupied for so long, it can get hairy. Right. So I always have on my jeans and tennis shoes when I do those. So Miss Lucretia, you're on the mic.
All right, fantastic. Good points, everybody. I mean, it's obviously the reason why you're on this forum is because you feel like you have valid points, and that's a good place to start. So I only have 4 points, but I want to try to get those points across pretty quickly. My first point, and like you were saying, the macro portion of it, I'll just say as a individual, I have in high school, I was a Black Heritage president. In college, I was a student body ambassador. I've served on several chambers of commerce. And now, of course, I wanted to join this forum because I saw something that I believe would be effective to bring about change. But most of those other forums were united to one side, I'll be honest. In Chamber of Commerce, I was one of 2 minorities that was there almost for 6 years. And that was just recently. That was still in the year 2000. So this is not Civil War's time. I mean, you know, this is not something that happened 40, 50 years ago. This is recent. So I know many of you probably understand that in other forums, everybody may look the same. But what I love about this one is this is very diverse, and we're opening up to where we hear everyone. And so that's my first point I wanted to bring about, and that's a great thing. So thank you, Mayor, for bringing about this initiative. Number 2, I wanted to bring about the point to where, and I have talked with people, I'm a student also at Daytona State College. I've talked with several people about this same point I'm about to make. Currently in our nation, one side is fighting for human rights and their freedom, which is also a part of the Constitution. The other one is fighting for their Second Amendment right, which is a part of the Constitution. How do we justify that either side is right? How do we justify that? One side is screaming, don't touch my property, don't touch my property, I'll shoot you. One is saying, all I need you to know is that people are dying, I need you to hear me. because my rights are being violated. So instead of listening, everybody is screaming, 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 screaming. Hear me, hear me, hear me. I'm right, I'm right, I'm right. Instead of saying, wait a minute, let me step back. Stop taking a gun to a shouting match. That's never okay. When do we feel like that is equal? And let's actually listen. You know, just like we were saying earlier, let's actually listen. Because how is your property, your bricks and your stones more valuable than a human being? How is that more valuable? That should not be. This is 2020. We should not be adding more value and having come from all the way from the White House, adding more value to somebody's bricks and wood than to a human life. So that's what I want to add. That's point number 2. And then number 3, I want to talk about immigration because Yusef, thank you so much for bringing that up. Like I said, my husband's parents, well, he's Latin, but they come from El Salvador. So it took them over 34 years to receive their citizenship. And I think most people in this country are unaware of what it takes to become a citizen of America. They think it's something that happens overnight, and they're sadly mistaken. Even our president's wife, after she was married to him, it took her a whole year to become a citizen of America. So let's not think that that's an easy situation to overcome. So we want to make sure we understand and we're listening to the people who are immigrating here, risking their lives to be here, and make sure we understand and have some sensitivity on that topic. And the last one is what we're talking about. And thank you, John, for bringing that up, because like you said, there's plenty of programs out here who are making a change about this, but I want to narrow the topic of good cop and bad cop. I think that stigma needs to be taken out of our language, because why should we have a good cop, bad cop name? I would love to say that when I see a cop, that stigma should be taken out, because he should automatically, he or she should be a good cop, right? I should not feel like as soon as you come, because by the time a citizen realizes that you're a bad cop, it's too late. But how do we know that? Do bad cops drive a different vehicle? Do bad cops have a different uniform? Absolutely not. So if I'm out in the community, there's no way that I'm saying somebody call 911 and I know that they're going to be okay, but then something else happens because that was a bad cop. But nobody knew that. They just dialed 911. So we want to rid that stigma. How do we rid that stigma? Is that the citizen's job? Absolutely not. We cannot do that job as citizens. That has to be in-house. It is absolutely up to the police and the DAs and the judges to make sure they are enforcing the rules and allowing cops the opportunity to have an open ear also, and the right to speak. If they see something and they see something that's wrong, don't punish them for saying and speaking up, because that's the same thing what happened to so many citizens. When they say something and they speak up, then automatically they're punished. So we want to make sure that cops, other fellow co-workers, when they see something that's wrong and they speak up, that they're not going to be punished for it. And then when someone has a strike 1, that's strike 2, you should be out. Because when you give them too many warnings, it becomes, I'm gonna tap you on the hand, I'm gonna tap you on the hand, I'm gonna tap you on the hand, and then you kill somebody. It's too late. So if you have a excessive force situation going on, you give one warning and the next your badge is taken away. To me, that's how it should be, because you have already gone through the program to uphold the law. You are wearing a badge that says you are there to serve and protect. So you should not get that much leniency, because we want to understand you are walking around in a community with a gun. Now, if you feel like you are feeling threatened, if you feel like your job is too stressful, here's the thing. maybe you should ask to go back into training or to do some ride-alongs or to maybe step back for a little bit until you can regroup, because the people in the citizens in the community are unarmed and untrained. Most of them, like you said, John, there is a small percentage of those really bad guys that need to be completely off the streets. But we have to understand, if my son was walking around in the neighborhood and maybe somebody came and fought him and I called 911, I would want to think that the guy that was coming or the girl that was coming as a police officer were coming to protect those children and to diffuse the situation, not when he gets there or she gets there, now they're afraid for their lives. So that's my last thing. So we want to make sure that's, I just want to finalize that the good cop, bad cop stigma definitely has to be where police will police the police. That's not something that would need to be taken care of in the community. But I do like Jakari's idea, honestly. If cops cannot feel safe taking off their uniform in the community and being a part of the community, that's also an issue. Because if you feel threatened for your life in your community, then we also have to reverse that stigma, because we need to be comfortable standing beside each other and living in the same community with one another. We should not feel unsafe. You should not feel unsafe. Yes, again, there are those people that will make you feel unsafe. Yes, I believe that. But we want to know that the cops that are there to take away the bad people and the ones that are there to help us. There you go.
Excellent. Excellent. We need to take you on our training trip, Dr. We need to take you with us on that train. That's an excellent points. I think with law enforcement, I hold law enforcement and educators to a higher standard than I hold anyone, because law enforcement actually has the authority to take life and liberty. They have that power and authority to take life and liberty. So they should be held to a higher standard. That standard can't be Jesus Christ, but it has to be a higher standard. And teachers, they can kill dreams, and sometimes that's just as deadly. So I think that those two professions, there's very little room for error. I also agree with you. I think it's law enforcement's responsibility to themselves and the profession to get those out that shouldn't have never been in the first place. I think it's the community's responsibility be the change that they want to see. So when we're in churches saying we want our kids to be doctors, lawyers, teachers, they need to add law enforcement to that. So it's one thing to protest and picket, is another to go in and become the next Jakari Young, change it from the inside. So I think that everything that you said is a part of a community conversation. And the reason I don't do the town halls, I think you go in and you'll have a conversation with law enforcement first and get them to see the perspective of the community, why the community see you or the badge the way they do. Go in and have a conversation with the community on how law enforcement sees the community and some of the issues. And then you bring both of them together and have a productive conversation as opposed to talking crossways to each other. So but I do think having the conversation and being able to see, even if you don't agree with both sides, the perspective, at least being aware of them, I think it puts you at a place you need to. And law enforcement, since you serve all the community, it's more important that you have an awareness of the perspective and how others see their lived and shared experiences and how all those things influence. So thank you very, very much. So next is Jeannie. Jenny? Is she there? If not, we'll move to Courtney.
Hi, sorry about that. It took me a minute to get myself unmuted. Thank you. So in my last answer, I kind of mishmashed my micro with my macro, and now we're talking about the macro. But listening to everybody's just wonderful comments, I've really been reminded about how my micro choice to become a self-appointed freelance environmental educator is such a accident of privilege. The way that I was raised to be able to choose any career path I wanted, to the point where when I decided I wanted to go to Japan and just go live there, I could go do that, learn Japanese and become a translator. And it wasn't it was because of how I was raised in a very privileged subset of society that I didn't even notice at the time. So one of the things I try to do as the founder and admin of a permaculture guild is identify other people who are maybe they're aspiring to get to do something and it would be a really good fit for them. And so I think, okay, what kind of help does that person need? And so I'm always noticing niches in the community that need filling. Like, gee, they need a bicycle shop over here and you're a really good mechanic. And I'm always just all about that. So, and again, my personal life totally mishmashes with my work life. And I'm really big on, addressing the food desert, or another term I learned for it was food apartheid, to reflect the fact that it's actually a result of systemic inequities. And so I'm looking for areas where there's a food desert and where someone might want a garden, and trying to hook up garden providers with those people. So lots of work to be done.
Thank you. I'm glad you brought up the issue of privilege, because I haven't been thinking that in context. I mean, I know about it when I'm thinking of white privilege.
Yeah.
And I think that with the white fragility that someone mentioned earlier, I think that helps with white. But even when the mayor and I were having a conversation before this, I was thinking about some of the decisions that I made as an individual. It wasn't white privilege, but I had a dad that had a 9th grade education, but he made sure that all of his kids went to college. And I had friends that didn't have dads like that. So there are different. I think white privilege is known and just because of the historical nature of it. But I do think that all of us share some privileges that we must recognize and should cause us to reach back even more to help other folks.
Absolutely. And there's certain kinds of privilege in life, like being tall. Tall people supposedly get better chances at job interviews than people who are not so tall. I mean, it's really, there's all different. There's ageism, different types of age privilege. And it can cut both ways. Like yesterday when I went into the hardware store, and the first person that came up to me was this very young man. But instead of asking the young man for the specific plumbing component I needed, I went to search for the old man because I figured he would know more. But that's ageism.
We all have it.
Yeah.
I just think the fact that white privilege is just founded in racial discrimination and oppression is I think it's very difficult for younger white kids and folk to see that, because I didn't have slaves, but the privileges through histories and generations that allow you to keep wealth and other things. But we're getting to the sociology side with Dean Kelsey. So let's get back to what we are now here.
Thank you.
Charlene?
I'm sorry, it just took me a minute to unmute, but I'm just here as a citizen. I'm a retired educator. I have been visiting the groups, trying to see where I could perhaps fit in. This one is of particular interest. My daughter is a sergeant in the Cleveland Police Force, and she's
I know your daughter well. She is a consummate law enforcement professional, and she actually came to visit me here in Wakulla County years ago.
Yes, and she's really doing a great job, really trying to make sure, she does the barbershop and beauty shop recruitments. She's also now responsible for EMT and that type of thing, recruitment, all the services. So, I know she was on the standards board when the Tamir Rice incident happened. And so this particular criminal justice is kind of close to my heart, because I pray constantly for God to cover her and, make sure things go the way that she wants them to, as far as recruitment and all. But like I said, I'm here as a citizen. I've been visiting the different groups, I guess one concern I have is I see people who are associated with different wonderful organizations here in Daytona. I don't see a lot of people who maybe are not associated with groups, but just are citizens of Daytona Beach. And I just wonder, is there some way that we could encourage people to become involved? Not through, one thing I know is that being retired, not working for someone, gives me a lot of freedom to say what I want to say when I want to say it.
Liberation.
Yes, yes.
Ms. Evans, I would encourage social media to use the hashtag Daytona for Equity, encourage your friends, share our platform, because I do want us all to become equity ambassadors so that the community embraces this, whether in power, in positions of influence, whether retired, whatever. We all have spheres of influence, and we need to use it everywhere we go so that this becomes, the core of our city's value, at the core of our values. And as mayor, this is one of the driving initiatives that I will have for the rest of my time in public life.
I think it's a absolutely amazing initiative. Like I said, I'm a senior. It's not my first rodeo with this type of thing. And hopefully it will blossom. Hopefully citizens will become involved, because I think that's the level that will institute change, when we change from grassroots up. And basically I'm here to listen. I'm here to hear what people have to say and what direction they're taking. I'm glad to be here.
Well, thank you very much. And again, you are to be commended for producing and raising a fine law enforcement professional like Sharman. She was here. She came down for our law enforcement, Florida HBCU's law enforcement recruitment symposium, and she spoke for a minute and had everybody shouting around her. So
yeah, she stays with the bullhorn. She is not shy.
Amen. Amen. So that tells me that you're on this call for a reason. And once again, I think being able to share whatever you put into her with others around the community, it would be not only better the community, but the city of Daytona as well. So I thank you for that.
Okay, and I'll be sure and tell her you said, hey.
Please do.
Okay.
The final two would be Dean Allen Kelsey and Kadisi. In terms of your place and space at Bethune-Cookman University, what can you do to assist the mayor with this excellent initiative? Dean Kelsey first, then Dr. Youssef.
Okay. What I could do from an institutional perspective, or from a systems perspective, to draw an analogy to what I would do within the system or the institution that I work to apply it to what I would do to help externally. So internally, and it goes back to what I think John said. John said that, he's not addressing all of the issues that are out there. He's looking at what's causing problems that need to be rectified or corrected so that the problems will stop. So if I come problem-focused aspect within my institution, I see people who have a high propensity to complex. Okay, they aren't coming from a place of legacy. They are coming and I'm looking at people that are supposed to be taking care of them. And so what I would be concerned about is that we have policies in place or procedures in place that would increase access for all of you or stakeholders to some of the initiatives, so that there there are invitations to participate. There are calls, there are reach outs. And so that is so unique, you know, something in place that allows to create. So we need some data, you know, and we need to look at what the data shows. So I would apply what I would do in that setting to what I would do when a problem is identified, or you can see a problem occurring. See what's in place to help people to rectify the problem. Okay, because all of them need access some way to address it. And if we do not, they need to have something in place, to reach out to the mayor's office. It may be to reach out to law enforcement. It may be to reach out to some group they consider to be a leader. An organization within the township, or you know, some type of orientation, like orientation that you know they would want to, because if they don't have access to addressing the problem, then they need to have access to propose and create how that might be addressed.
Thank you. You're in and out a little bit, but I got the gist of it. You're in and out a little bit, but I got the gist of it.
Oh, okay.
Dr. Youssef?
I appreciate y'all. I mean, I have to go to another meeting, so but you know, thank y'all for putting this on.
Thank you for joining us. We'll follow up with another email for future discussions and things.
Yes, sir. Thank y'all.
Thank you. Dr. Youssef, last but not least.
I'll be quick. I just think that as department chair of the biggest programs on campus, particularly as it relates to criminal justice, I think that understanding that all our students come from different educational opportunities, different neighborhoods, and they've had different levels of, you know, K through 12 experiences, but once they get to us, holding them to a standard of excellence and doing what we have to do as professors and faculty to get them to or social workers or juvenile probation officers, but just preparing our students with global critical thinking, written skills, and just exposing them to as many different opportunities so that the various, like people mentioned on the call, the different levels of access to privilege, but understanding that we all have something to give. So although our experiences might be different, that whatever we have to give can fortify students in different ways. So connecting to our students and just trying to produce the highest standard of excellence in them.
Thank you. I see Courtney joined in.
I did. Good morning. I didn't have too much to say. It's just interesting to hear a lot of what everyone's saying, which is kind of ironic because I'm a defense attorney. So I work with a lot of the clients that unfortunately, you know, come in and through, and I hear it over and over again. That's like the first, especially ones of color, unfortunately, the first thing they say is, well, I don't trust the system. I don't trust the cops. What are you guys going to do about it? Why can't this change? What is happening? So it's definitely good to have something where the conversation is being had and something to be done about it. It's definitely unfortunate when I deal with the juveniles, since I represent them too at times, where they have that same mentality going forward, or they think that that's the only thing they have to look forward to is eventually coming upstairs with some of my felony cases. So it's great to kind of cut that off at the pass, because I do try to have some of them come and watch me in court to get them to learn the system and learn different things and let them know that, you know, unfortunately what the stigma is that's attached to it all is not necessarily the same thing, and you can't actually change it and do something about it.
Right. Thank you. Be the change you want to see. With that being said, if there's, Mayor, if anyone wanted to email any additional information, because Dr. Youssef and Kess and I, we're going to try to compile and synthesize this into, you know, a written document with the micro versus the macro. But if anyone has any additional information and want to share it with us, how do they get it to you? And then by virtue of getting it to us?
Okay. Equity Initiative at codb.us. Equity Initiative at codb.us. If you would forward any correspondence that you have, what we're doing is we are also holding we're going to build a website, or as an addition, not build a website, but add to the Mayor's Equity Initiative a resource page that will have resources for all participants and citizens throughout the community. Will be able to go to that site and find resources to help them address equity. So if you have, and that was one of the reasons I asked, that if you notice over in the chat box, if you have resources for future conversations, you can put them in there, and then we can actually save these chats. I forgot, they showed me yesterday how to do that. And I was able to do it yesterday. But actually we can save the chat, and I'll let someone else who remembers how to do it tell us. And that way, because we want to hold on to all of the resources that we have and be able to share it across the community. Does anyone remember how we save the chat? Oh.
I have to get students to do all that stuff, Mayor. I'm not evolved to that point with that.
Go into the chat box. There's 3 little dots.
Exactly.
Click on those dots and it should drop down for you.
Okay. Yep, there it is. All right, so and then you just save the chat and you'll have whatever's typed in there saved, and you can go back and use that as an immediate resource for yourself. But we're gonna compile all of this information. But as these things come forward to us, Dr. Nelson, I will then forward it to you and Dr. Youssef.
Okay, we'll put it together. And I guess we talked so much about Sherman that she showed up. Hey, young lady, how are you?
How's everybody doing? Can you hear me?
We would be doing better if we could get you from the Cleveland Police Department to the Daytona Beach Police Department. We would be doing better. The mayor's going to work on that one.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're bringing me home, huh? Oh, good to see you guys. I'm glad that I was able. My mom sent me a message and said, hey, pop in if you can pop in. I was like, let me go out in the hallway, see what I can do. So very good to see you all.
Good to see you. Do you have any nuggets to share with us about your work, since we've heard so many good things about you?
Well, currently, okay, so for those who don't know me, I'm Charmin Leon, and I lived in Daytona for a long time, did a lot of work with these gentlemen on here. I'm now in Cleveland, Ohio. I am a police sergeant with the Cleveland Division of Police. And I'm the officer in charge of recruitment for police, fire, and EMS, everything public safety here in the city of Cleveland. The city of Cleveland is also in a settlement agreement with the Department of Justice and for the Division of Police. So we are knee deep in reform, needed reform. As we know, I'm extremely proud of the work of the citizenry across the nation and internationally. I don't think we've had one day since the George Floyd killing that there has not been a demonstration about that, because we know it's not just about George Floyd, okay? It's about years of this not being right. It's about the systemic racism that has caused these circumstances which our oppressed communities continue to grapple with, to continue to have to live through. And so it's about all of it. And I'm just proud and happy of the part that I can play in that. And if you all would look, I'm so proud of our local media outlets, because they have started conversations around race on there, and they're asking the community. They're asking the community what they should be reporting on, what is important to them to be highlighted so that people are informed when we have so many more people at home now consuming social media outlets. to be, and I believe that's the reason why people are taken to the streets, because if you're in your little bubble and you do not understand the gravity of over policing, if you do not understand our true history, which is rooted in slave patrols in Tammany Hall and out of Boston, then you do believe that it's a moral issue, a moral failing of the people in these communities instead of a systemic a problem. So I won't go on. I'm sorry. I'm joining y'all. I'm a guest.
We appreciate you. We appreciate it. Mr. Mayor, I think that we have enough between Dr. Youssef and Dr. Kelly and Nelson and I. Rich conversation today. I was just thoroughly impressed about the openness of the conversation. And we all know that there's work to be done, but thank you for your leadership and the courage that you had to embark upon such a huge project in such a little bit of time. So with that, we'll let you close us out.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone who's joined us this morning. And I really appreciate the insights and the sharing. Each of these focus groups has to take on a life of its own. I would like to see us get more people engaged here. And let's push the needle in that area, because, you know, we are largely sort of preaching to the choir. So one of the things I did want to share with you all is something that I'm working on, because for me, all of this work around equity runs together and ultimately it intersects. It really belongs in one large pot, but you can't cook in a big pot and separate things out. So I had to break them up. If you cook it in one pot, it's going to run together. So I had to break them up so that they could sort of focus and hone in on their individual areas. But ultimately, even in these discussions, we see how they intersect. I was talking with a friend of mine yesterday who's starting a program where she's focusing on, health, education, focusing on teaching people how to take charge of their spiritual lives. And all of the things that she talked about came back to this equity initiative, because we have to be educated, we have to be healthy, we have to live in community, we have to communicate through our media, we have to have spiritual lives, and we need equity in all of those domains. And so I didn't know how this was going to come together, and I still don't completely know how it's all going to come together, but somehow everything seems to really be synthesizing itself. So I am meeting with a young man, gentleman. I've been meeting with him for about 2 years. And this guy has been working on a platform. And initially, I didn't know how the platform would relate to me as a mayor. But this platform essentially will bring, it will be a data collection platform where you will be able to collect data. I'm gonna give you an example. Every business will be able to load their information into this platform. Every citizen that is interested will be able to load their personal demographics and their goals and their dreams and their needs into this platform without necessarily identifying, who they are. So, for example, if we have a single mother who's a single mother with 2 kids, and she has a goal of losing weight, but she's also a little bit self-conscious about working out. So she doesn't want to go to Gold's Gym. And she has a son who's 9 years old and wants to learn how to play basketball. Well, she could load all of this information into this database, and the community, we will all load our information into this database. So if I'm a mentor, I'm a basketball coach, my information is there. And ultimately, she will be able to find a prescription in the city of Daytona Beach that would help her to access what she needs. The other thing is that this platform's objective is to help us as leaders, because all of us are policymakers. but it will help us to develop and design policies as a mayor, as a college professor, as law enforcement leader, whatever sphere of influence we have, as a business owner, because this same lady needs childcare at night. So if I'm a business owner, I know then that this is a need in the community of Daytona Beach, because there are 100 other women or men who need childcare at night. So there's an opportunity for me to invest in the community because I have the data that says this is what we need. So the objective is, and for me, this is not about Derrick Henry. It has to have someone who is willing to say it's an initiative, but this belongs to us. It belongs to the community. But at the end of the day, if we're going to create a society that is truly equity driven, that has a true goal, and equity is at our heart, is at our core, we have to give people the solutions and the capacity to solve their problems every opportunity that they can. Because government can't do it, institutions can't do it, but collectively, if we bring all of our powers to bear, then we can empower people to solve their problems. But we have to show them where the resources are and how to find those resources. And by the way, this same lady who wants to work out at home, who wants to work out, will be able to access resources that show her how to work out in her own home, because she's not feeling confident yet to work out outside of her home. Yeah. So this is something that I'm hoping will come forth and emerge around November, which was scheduled to be our next meeting session. I'm not sure when we will meet next. I will meet with Dr. Nelson and talk with him about it, and then we will send out an email for this platform, just so we'll know what we believe our direction should be. Because I don't believe in just meeting and talking just to talk. Right. I'm a person that, as you know, I'm all about, once I see something to be done, because to be honest, this whole initiative started over pillow talk with my wife, who said, you have to do something to hear from people. And my point to her was, at the end of the day, I'm a listener. When I ran for mayor 8 years ago, I made one promise. And it was a promise that I would listen before I ever asked anyone to hear me. But after I listen, I believe in action. And more than action for me, because I don't think government can solve our problems. I believe in community action, and I will push and prod and try to push us into the direction of having some actionable. That's why I asked for an actionable agenda. And I really appreciate the state attorney's office coming and showing what they're offering, because much of what they're doing, I didn't know. And I'm proud of Deputy Chief Young and his agenda. And let us all embrace an agenda and pass this on and bring more people to the table who can influence our community. So if there are no further questions, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today.
Mayor Henry, I think give us between Dr. Youssef and Dr. Kelsey, and I'll get put something on paper, and then we'll send it back out to you, to the group, and then as you schedule, we can do it that way. Get it.
Sounds great.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We appreciate it. Sharman, good seeing you, sweetheart. Take care.
Awesome.
Good seeing you guys too. Thank you for having me. Thanks, Mom.